All right, welcome back to Business. Today we are having a conversation on matters startups in Kenya, and it's about inbound conversation. Are we able to attract as many startups from the global platform as possible? Because Africa is the current and Africa is the future. Where is Kenya in that regard? That's our discussion today. And I have a very heavy panel. We had just finished on a tax issue, you know. A tax is normally very sensitive, you know. You mentioned tax and some people have, flashbacks of losing money and whatnot, which is kind of interesting. But right now, that is just foundational. Now we want to talk about selling Kenya as a place where startups can set foot and grow and set shop. So, Carol, in regards to skills, because skills tend to be the make or break when it comes to startups. You're operating within very tight margins. You want to have the right people to be able to accomplish what you want to do. In Kenya, how wide is our talent pool? How capable are we to accommodate global startups that want to be here?
I think Kenya is one country that is very blessed when it comes to skills and talent. And these numbers are ever growing. If you look at various sectors, starting from agribusiness, going to technology, going to healthcare services, we see pharmaceutical space specifically currently growing very fast. Looking at even entrepreneurship, I think Kenyans are very entrepreneurial people. And so when it comes to skills, we are very talented, we are very equipped. Backed up by even our education system, I think we have one of the strongest. And so you find that the training that most candidates would go through would be very solid. We look at, and I would want to pick a specific industry like technology. I think Kenya has become a hub for the technology space. Yes. And this is informed by, the tech startups that have come here, which have set up successfully. We look at fintech, that is the finance services, which is again the banking services being backed up by technology. So that has again attracted and grown specialists and experts in that field as well. So in terms of skills and talent, very wealthy, I would say. Kenya is very wealthy, and ever growing.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And later on, we shall revisit that issue of tech. We've been seeing a lot of tech layoffs, man. Still a lot of, people are coding now. They thought maybe I should have went to legal school. Yeah. For the lawyers. But Johnson, for the legal framework now, if I'm seated somewhere in the Bahamas and I'm thinking of setting up something in Kenya, what should I be very aware of when it comes to the laws? Are there infrastructure within the law that enable me to set up easily? And are there things that maybe you've observed among startups that they tend to ignore legally that sometimes become an impediment as time moves along?
Thank you. Now, I think we have to go back. If we want to understand the law, we have to go back to the policy that informs these legal laws that have been enacted by Parliament. So if we go back to the reason why Kenya, again, is the beacon of all kind of tech startups, we have to go back to the success story of M-Pesa. Okay? When M-Pesa launched in Kenya, there was absolutely no regime that governed its operation. No one could conceive that one day it would become this global phenomena in terms of mobile payments. I mean, companies have been trying to replicate the success, but they've, had their different difficulties. So coming back to the law, the government has been very consistent regarding the agenda for digitalization of its services. That's the first one. And also the aspect of automation of the government processes. We remember before the changeover from the previous regime, we had a government that was very passionate about what some have said, revenue collection. Yeah. So as part of the continuity from the previous regime, we have now a government that is also now intent on unifying this digitalization agenda up and also tying it back to automation. So if you're sitting in the Caribbean islands, as you're describing, it's very easy for you to understand what is going on in the country, because you remember that for any destination to be attractive, we have to reduce the issue of transactional frictions, and we also have to deal with the issue of informational asymmetry. So what does that mean? It means that is it possible for a foreign investor to find out, okay, what jurisdictional challenges would exist for their market entry into this jurisdiction? That's the first one. And upon expressing that intention of coming to Kenya as their destination, what challenges, what likely transactional challenges are they to face? Okay. So early on in the after the 2010, we have the government coming in, and we're looking at even the most basic form of market entry, which is incorporation of entities. This is a process which was initially done manually, but now we have that process end to end is automated. We have no form of human intervention. We have no form of any delays which would arise from human intervention. So from a regulatory point of view, the government has set a very solid foundation to have an attractive and also enabling environment to have policies which are, you remember, for policies, there has to be policy certainty. Okay? For an investor, you have to ensure that the system works how it's expected to, and the effects or the outcomes from that operation can be predicted. So for startups, the challenges that they normally face from our advisory point of view is how they integrate themselves into our compliance metrics. And this is something Carol and Sam are also very in tune with. And I think they can speak to that as well. So we have, if you look at the experiences that we have had for the past decade, you will see that the flaws or the failures or the difficulties that these startups have had relate to how they respond to the regulatory obligations which are created by government. So the easiest challenges you have, issues that you mentioned earlier, the issue of layoffs, you have the issue of tax compliances, you have the issue of how they interpret our favorable laws to their advantage. Okay, so are you setting up business in Kenya so that you can come and exploit, okay, the abundance of talent? Okay, and you are aware that there is an ongoing case relating to the content moderators for Meta. So these are some of the challenges that you can look at in terms of the startup culture and also the effect that the startup culture has had on the economy. There are the people who exploit those challenges positively, and there are the people who are applying those flexes in the regime to do what? To gain an unfair advantage.
Yes.
So maybe some
I know, in the taxation, especially when you talk about gaining unfair advantage, and sometimes even incorporation of these entities, as much as they set up here in Kenya, then you dig a little bit deeper, you find, they're domiciled somewhere else. It's just operational that is happening in this jurisdiction. So Sam, as is rightly put it, I know when we touch on money, it just becomes sensitive. Across all cultures, everyone just becomes sensitive when you say money, yeah? So for these startups, are there some of those legal gaps? That is one. But even as you respond to some of the queries that is raised, also touch on the taxation regime, not from a broader sense, but from a more specific sense. For startups that want to come here, what are those tax incentives specifically that they can take advantage of as they set shop, that they should be aware, that sort of enable them to have an easier landing space?
Yeah, that's a very good question, especially when you're asking yourself if I've just set foot into Kenya, where would I start in order to, we always say that tax is a cost, just like any other business cost. And at the end of the day, every businessman would always aim at minimizing their costs. And that's the starting point. So what happens is that our tax laws have been evolving over time. And as I said, if you look at the current regime, although these are measures that started even with the previous regime, they've always been going for this principle of simplicity. When you talk of the tax policies, there are these common principles. Any tax policy at least should show some equity, fairness. There should be certainty, and then there's the whole issue of simplicity. So what has been happening is that the tax laws are now taking this direction where they're trying to make sure that it is as simple for anyone who comes in,
yes,
whether as a small investor startup or as a big one. So, for example, what has happened is that there are some new tax regimes which have been introduced to target these startups. For instance, there's the talk of the so-called turnover tax. Yeah. So what happens with turnover tax is that it's trying to make the calculation of taxes as simple as possible. For a long time, we've always known that when you're talking of income tax, it's a tax on the profit that you're going to make. Now, when you try to for instance, demand that some of these startups, for instance, in the tech sector, at times when they come in, they might not have all those resources to even maybe set up a complete finance department and accounting department. So when you talk of them embracing the so-called turnover tax,
yes,
it's as simple as telling them there is this tax of 1%, now it's going up to 3%, that will only apply on the revenue that you're going to report here. So we don't need you to, prepare books of accounts and prove to us that this is your profit. All that we want you to do is just come in, embrace this turnover tax, which is a monthly tax, and that will be it when it comes to the taxation of your income. Now, the only worry that is there, or the gap that is there, is that our tax law is not being consistent in terms of saying who qualifies as a startup. So, for instance, when it comes to the turnover tax, they are saying it will only apply to those who are making a turnover of between 1 million shillings to 25 million shillings. But at the same time, you realize that there are some other incentives which they've brought in. For instance, I had talked about that mechanism that especially the tech industry would use. They would always want, in order to attract the best personnel, the best skilled and knowledgeable programmers and all that. They would always come up with the so-called share ownership plans, where they would tell them that what will happen is that once we hit the market, and we're making profits, we want to share the profits with you. So we'll be giving you some shares. Now, the tax law last year came in and said that for the first 5 years, after an employee has signed up this employee share ownership plan, no tax will apply on any share increase value in that. But it goes ahead and says these will only apply to startups, and it defines that the startups should be any entities which are getting a turnover of less than 100 million shillings. So you can see here at least there's like a wider bracket of who a startup is. So that consistency needs to be there, such that if we are saying that we want to bring all these raft of incentives to these startups, let's first of all be clear: are we talking of guys who are below 25 million, or everyone who is 100 million and below will qualify under that? Just to finish up on that, once, for instance, you come in and embrace an example of the turnover tax, the next thing is when it comes to compliance, what am I supposed to do? So the tax laws are making it very simple. For instance, there used to be that requirement that was introduced by the Finance Act that would insist that, for instance, the invoicing that one does needs to be harmonized in, one platform. But then again, there's always that concern, how affordable would it be for some of these startups to even start investing in compliance. So we are talking of the compliance costs.
Okay.
And you'll see that right now there's some draft regulations which have come in, which are trying to, in some way, exempt some of these small startups from some of these compliance costs.
All right,
Yeah.
definitely. Carol, when you have legal minds and tax minds, yeah, the time shrinks. Yeah, time shrinks. And in the recruitment world is always, being very specific on what you want and what the client needs and whatnot. But I think we've been able to lay a good foundation for future discussions regards to when startups are thinking about coming to Kenya. What should be at the back of their mind, legally speaking, tax-wise speaking, and also skills and manpower speaking. In the subsequent, I think, engagements, it will be critical for us to now look at those nuances that we have, cultural nuances that we have when you are recruiting, for example. What do you look out for? What is most in demand? But unfortunately, time goes. Yeah, that's the thing. Our time is up, gentlemen and ladies. Yeah, but we've covered ground, right?
Yeah, just crashed this.
I know. I think everyone has answered on average 2 or 3 questions. Yeah? That's the beauty about big panels. Yeah, next time we can do 2 or 3 hours in the near future. But I really appreciate you guys for making time to engage in this very important topic. And I think we've just set the foundation for the year 2024. Hopefully it's a big year for startups, especially international players coming into this space. Really appreciate you. Thank you very much. We have at the very end Jensen Ondari, who is the advocate at Ogeto Otachi and Advocates. At the center, we have Caroline Kariuki, lead recruiter at Gap Recruiter. And right here by my side is the man himself that helps you to deal with taxes. He's the manager at tax services at Trudel and Partner. Really appreciate you for your time. That's where we put our full stop. Thank you very much for joining with us over the past 1 hour on business today. I'm Noki Kimbo. Up next, we have Mbuya KTN. Stay tuned.